I'll bet you didn't know that trauma and PTSD were not formally recognized by the psychology world as a formal diagnosis until 1980. That's it. Okay. That's about close to around the time that I was born. It's hard to believe. And it's crazy. This is a crazy thing to believe, right? If when we look at the history of PTSD and trauma, it has been mislabeled. It's been yeah, like it was mostly attached to war vets. It was called shell shock. Often, people who had some sort of trauma or some sort of PTSD were often labeled with a like seen as though they had this issue because of a moral or personal failing. And so we shunned those people. I mean, that's how history was. And in that regard, the real moral failing, right, would be to ignore that this is a real issue that affects so many day-to-day people and just accuse them of having some sort of evil in their life. That they're bad. That the reason why they have this issue is that they're just a bad person. But I was fascinated. I couldn't believe it that it wasn't formally recognized until 1980. If you're new here, by the way, my name's Scott. I'm a licensed therapist here in the beautiful state of Utah. This video is going to be specifically about what is the best form of trauma treatment and why is it internal family systems or IFS. Now, I might be a little bit biased on this topic. I've made content before about why I don't like EMDR. I think it's crap. I mean, I could make I could just write volumes, I feel like, on why I think EMDR is not very good and why I think it's a problem. But this particular excerpt is going to come from an article that I wrote on my website. I will put the link in the description below. You can go read the whole article if you'd like. So in this video, I'm going to do a little bit of a comparison actually, what I'll probably do, I'm going to give a very brief overview of some of the issues with EMDR, not all of them, just a couple, but I'm mostly going to get into the reasons why I'm such a big fan of internal family systems or IFS. Okay. So, with EMDR, it's complicated. It's a very, very complicated therapy method. Um, it was great when they did it when they ran it in a lab. It's basically when they sent it out to the whole therapy world. There are a lot of ways that it's just broken down and it's just not holding up and it's not doing its job. The biggest mistake that most EMDR therapists make is they're actually not respecting the trauma threshold that clients have. Clients have a certain trauma threshold. If you do not respect their trauma threshold, you will re-traumatize them, plain and simple. And that's my biggest gripe with EMDR is that this is happening far too frequently. Most of the EMDR therapists don't want to acknowledge this. They don't want to recognize this. They live in denial. No, it's not. No, it's not. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? And they don't listen. I've tried to tell them. I've tried to ask them to be more aware of this issue, and they don't even want to They don't even want to admit that it exists. So it's sort of whatever. Um, but these are there. So I'm going to break down several reasons why I prefer IFS or internal family systems. If you don't know IFS, IFS works with the subconscious. To me, it's a structured way of doing shadow work. Okay, shadow work is a very effective way to create change and to kind of heal your subconscious. I think effective shadow work and internal family systems is really, really good. It can be very, very healing for people. So IFS basically works under the notion that people are broken into parts or pieces, or I've called them fragments. And those pieces or parts, they kind of have their own agenda and they're kind of working against each other and they're kind of working against you. They kind of do their own thing. Have you ever noticed a conflict about something? My heart says one thing, my head does another, or I feel compelled to do one thing even though I know it's a bad idea, right? This is why, right, we have different parts. So IFS seeks to work with those parts. Like, let's isolate the part and work with that part. Okay. And if we can more or less heal that part or work with that part and get it to change what it does, it will integrate to you, right? What we call the self in IFS. And when it integrates, it makes you more whole. It gives you more integration or more integrity, right? Okay. So that is a very, very short overview of what IFS is. And so I'm going to give you this list of reasons why I love IFS. I'm going to kind of fly through these. Number one, it's not complicated. Okay. Some therapy methods, they're way too complicated. That's one of my gripes with the EMDR. It's way too complicated. It has 8 phases. And does that look like? Yeah. 1, 2, 3. 8 phases of EMDR. Way too complicated. It should be the clinician should be focused on phase 3, heavily on phase 3. Instead, they're heavily on phase 4, which is translating out to be destroy the trauma threshold and re-traumatize people, even though they have much more complicated psychobabble jargon words for it. Okay, IFS is not complicated. It can be explained to people in just a few minutes, and it's very simple, basic techniques that can be easily duplicated and repeated. Okay, it's not complicated. I like it because it's simple. It's very simple. Okay, simple is different from easy, by the way. Simple means not complicated. Number 2, it gets to the root of the problem. Okay, now too many therapists, too many therapies focus on the behavior. The behavior is a symptom. Focusing only on a behavior is often a very, very ineffective way to do anything, especially trauma. Especially when it comes to trauma, just focusing on the behavior around trauma is not going to do anything. IFS gets right to the root of the problem. It helps rewrite the source code of your psyche, and then it has a ripple effect through the rest of your layers, right? So number 3, this one is really good. I love this about IFS. It's a highly, highly compassionate approach. It's intended to help you have a more compassionate approach towards yourself. The therapist has a compassionate approach towards you and your behaviors, your dysfunctional behaviors, and it really is built to work off of this compassionate approach. Without the compassion, it's just not very effective. And so I think compassion is an extremely important part of healing and getting better, especially when we're addressing some really painful things that we have tucked away in there. So IFS is built to be a highly compassionate approach. Again, just because I dislike EMDR to such an extreme degree, my first exposure to EMDR in a training setting, I didn't sign up to get certified in EMDR. It was like at a conference. It was so sterile and uncompassionate, and it was like talking about people like they're a lab experiment. And even the videos that they showed were from real sessions, and I was like shocked at how distressed the person was and how distant and cold the therapist was. I thought it was awful. Number 4 is a good one too. I love this one. IFS addresses the trauma without talking about the specific events and without fleshing out the painful details. Probably one of the biggest myths about treating trauma I've learned is that you have to process the ugly, gory details and disclose them to this stranger that you're paying, right, in gory details in order to get rid of the trauma. I do not believe that's true whatsoever. IFS does not ask or need to ask about the specific details of traumatic events. What it does instead is it addresses that part or that fragment that's holding onto the memories and holding onto the pain, and using that that compassionate approach to help it release that pain. Okay. Again, we can help trauma. I've helped a lot of people improve their trauma symptoms without ever really discussing anything in detail. And which I think is great, because we never have to disrespect that trauma threshold, and we never have to worry about re-traumatizing them. What a shocker. What a concept. Okay, number 5. It's effective. It just works. It just works. EMDR people will tell you that EMDR is extremely effective. The outcomes are not nearly as good as they want you to think they are. I've known lots of people that have gone to EMDR with zero progress. I think that patients just tell the therapist what they want to hear. I think the therapists are like, "Oh, you're doing better, right?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah," because they don't want to hurt the therapist's feelings. Honestly, the EMDR group, they're a little culty. It's like a religion, and they don't want to hear any criticisms of it. So if someone's not benefiting from it, or if someone harmed by EMDR, they don't want to hear it. They just don't. So they will tell you generates extremely good results. It's not great, but every approach to therapy has to be done correctly or done well. But I like IFS because I found it to be effective. That's just effective. Okay. Number 6, it creates true healing. It really does. And who doesn't want that? Okay. If there's a part of you and it's in your subconscious and it's holding on to a lot of pain, if we can get it to release that pain and not hold on to it anymore as a protective measure, and it will integrate, you will feel so much better. You will heal. You will find healing. It's amazing. And finally, number 7, just because I'm wanting to wrap this video up, number 7, I've personally benefited from it. I'm a person. I've had my issues. I've had my struggles. I've had my challenges. I have done my own parts work. I'm the type of therapist, I do my own work. I am always doing my own work. I'm able to help people with their own therapy because I have done all of this myself. I've done it myself. A lot of therapists are up in arms about the fact that they have issues and they need to work on them, and they don't. Most therapists you will find are not actively working on themselves, which I know you think like, what? The irony here, right? So I know IFS works because I've done my own parts work, and I have found it to be tremendously helpful in just resolving issues and improving my behavior and finding a better life. Okay, so there you have it. Those are the reasons why I personally think IFS is better for trauma over EMDR. EMDR has a much better reputation than it deserves. Much better, much better. If you have severe trauma and you look for an EMDR therapist, there's a good chance you're going to find someone who's not very good at it and is going to re-traumatize you. And so if you are determined to do EMDR, just make sure that A, they're good at it and they know what they're doing, because a lot of them don't. B, they're conscientious, they're aware of the fact if you're struggling with it or if you're being re-traumatized. Okay. But those are like 2 of the biggest tips if you're really determined to look for EMDR. But I think it's overrated. I think the reason why it's so popular is because it's kind of a cult. There, I said it. Anyways, don't forget to subscribe here if you haven't already. I need to go change my laundry. Thanks for being here. I hope that was helpful. If you want the full article, go check out my website. Link will be in the description below. We'll see you next time.